There were 20 of them. By sunrise, most were gone. Not injured, not arrested, gone. An entire North Korean national hockey team vanished. In a single night, right under the eyes of the men paid to watch their every move. These weren't ordinary men. They threw their bodies onto the ice until their bones cracked, all for the glory of a country that owned them. So what could make them abandon everything, the medals, the honor, the only life they'd ever known, and run into the freezing dark? The answer was hidden inside a hockey glove. One crumpled sheet of paper. If a guard ever found it, it wouldn't just kill him. It would erase 3 generations of his family. His parents, his wife, his newborn daughter. What was written on that paper? And of all the men who ran that night, how many ever touched free ground? Stay with me, because beneath all that ice was the hottest night of their lives. If this story moves you, please subscribe and hit like. Your support is what brings these true painful stories into the light.
My name is Kang Jin Ho. That's not my real name. Back then, I just turned 40. I'm from Cheongjin in North Hamgyong province. Maybe you've heard of it, a rough port city.
On the East Coast.
Known for its biting wind, the salt smell of the sea, and pollock fishing. When I was little, winter would come and the big reservoir at the edge of town froze solid, all the way to the bottom. I'd spend the whole day out there. We made crude skates from wooden planks and rusty wire, and we carved up that ice until dark. The north wind cracked our cheeks red. My toes went numb inside thin socks. I didn't care, that feeling gliding free across the ice. I loved it more than anything. Funny looking back, I had no idea those cheap wooden skates would one day flip my whole life upside down. No idea they'd drop me right into the line of fire. My father spent his whole life in a dark coal mine, a quiet man, stubborn, solid. Back then, when the ration coupons stopped and the food ran out, our whole family got by for days on a thin corn gruel, with a little salt for flavor, empty stomachs, clenched fists. My mother did whatever it took to keep something in our mouths. She'd head out to the market in the cold and sell fermented pollock. She'd salted with her own hands, just to scrape together a few coins. I can still see her cracked knuckles, her bent back. Hunger was just the air we breathed. We leaned on each other's warmth and made it through one shaky day at a time. Then the year I turned 12, a provincial sports official spotted me darting across the ice. He picked me for the hockey program. It was a miracle. When my parents heard, they held each other and jumped for joy. An athlete called up by the state meant more rice rations.
And more than that.
They believed it would lift our family's standing, our future. I believed it too back then.
Pure and simple.
Fighting on the ice for the party. And the nation, that was the one way to lift my parents out of a life of struggle. The one way to save my family from starving, or so I thought. But the dream of a boy and the reality of that training were 2 different worlds. The training was hell, built to break a body and a mind. 5 in the morning, before the sky even turned gray, we were already on the ice, and we stayed there until late at night. In sub-zero cold, wearing gear other people had thrown away, I fell over and over. My toes got frostbite. My fingers split open. On the frozen laces, red with blood. When I collapsed, the coach kicked me with his boot. Get up, for the honor of the nation. I believed even that beating was a sacred kind of love for the party. When I got a rare visit home, my mother would save her precious flour and make dumplings for me. No meat inside, just dry dough. But on those days, the whole family laughed like we owned the world. My father came home from the mine, his hands black with coal dust, and he'd rest one on my head. Become a hero on the ice. Make our country proud. That one sentence was the pillar, holding up my whole life. The winter I turned 16, in the middle of a snowstorm, I got called up to the central team in Pyongyang. I had to leave Cheongjin behind. At the station, in a thick, freezing fog, my mother fixed the collar of my worn jacket. Don't get hurt. Come back safe. She wiped away tears. As the platform pulled away from me, I swore I'd come home with a gold medal. I didn't know it would be the last time I'd ever hold her hand.
The years passed.
I ground my youth into that Pyongyang ice. And then one day, there was a tiny newborn asleep. In my arms, my daughter, more precious than my own eyes. Now I had one more reason to protect, one more reason worth dying for. Eventually, I made the national team. We qualified for an international tournament overseas. It was an honor for my whole family. It was also a leash around all our throats. I remember one important match abroad, fighting for the puck, A defender's elbow caught me square on the jaw. Hot, coppery blood spread inside my helmet. My vision flashed white and I went down, gasping on the ice. And in that second, from the shadows behind the bench, my eyes met the handler's, a state security agent in a heavy black coat. I could read his lips. Get up. Shame the party and your family's dead. We weren't athletes. We were disposable gladiators, thrown out to sell the greatness of the regime. A cracked rib, a chest splitting with pain. I'd swallow a handful of painkillers and tighten my laces again, face flushed with rage. The blood I spilled on the ice was nothing. Nothing compared to the blood I'd spill in a security interrogation room if we lost. On our shoulders, 15 of us, soaked in sweat, rested the honor of the nation and the lives of hundreds of family members. The terror we carried into every game, I can't put into words. After one match, drenched in sweat and blood, we rode the big bus back to our quarters. It was already dark outside. The handler snapped at us. Anybody looks out that window, I'll take his eyes. He ordered the blackout curtains shut tight. His reason? The sick, rotten light of capitalism would cloud the eyes of the party's pure warriors. The exhausted players dropped their heads. But I glanced through a gap in the heavy curtain. 1 inch, maybe. And through that inch, I saw something that collapsed everything I'd ever believed. 5 degrees Fahrenheit. A strange city in Northern Europe. Christmas lights and neon glowing in every color. Brighter than anything in dim. Onirios. Gray Pyongyang. People in thick coats met each other's eyes and laughed open at peace. A father held street food in one hand and his child's hand in the other. Young couples kissed in each other's arms. Not one face in that crowd carried the shadow of surveillance. Not one carried the shadow of hunger. Our country told us those capitalist pigs lived in a hell where they starved and exploited each other. But the world in front of me was heaven. And this bus curtain sealed, all of us dragged along. Like animals, this was the real hell.
Cold, airless.
In the window, I caught my own faint reflection, my scarred cheek, my empty eyes, the soul drained out of them. And in that moment, deep in my chest, the great wall of loyalty that had stood frozen. My whole life it cracked, a sound like lightning splitting stone. Could my wife, my daughter, ever laugh once, just once under lights like those? Then I looked around. A few of my teammates were stealing. The same glimpse through the curtain. Their eyes shook, the same as mine. Nobody said a word, but I understood right then that we were all feeling the same crack. The most terrifying thing about North Korean society is the machine built to make neighbors and teammates watch and report on each other. Back in the locker room, more than 20 grown men peeled off their gear. All you could hear was heavy breathing and the dull thud of equipment
Hitting the floor.
The roommate I'd shared 10 years of ice and sweat with, he was the most dangerous enemy in that room. One careless word from me tonight, and he could report it to get his own family ahead. Silence was the only shield keeping you alive. I sat alone in the corner, wrapping my bloody ankle in bandages. Then Chilmin came over and dropped down beside me. Our team's assistant captain and the only friend from home, from those reservoir days back in Chongjin. He kept a towel over his head, staring at the floor. His rough, thick hand slid quietly onto my knee. His fingers trembled, and he began to write.
Presseo, go.
My heart dropped. A tight ache spread through my chest. I turned and looked at Cheolmin's eyes. I'd never seen it before, a resolve that had made peace with death, mixed with raw terror. Fail, and 3 generations go to the camps. And that night, I learned it wasn't just the 2 of us. The next day, small signals started, moving around the locker room. 2 of the younger players traded a few quiet words, hiding their voices under the running faucet. A senior player, sidelined by injury, pretended to wrap a bandage and threw us a look that said everything. Out of maybe 20 players, nearly half were carrying the same crack, each in his own way. I glanced at the door. The handler stood there, blowing cigarette smoke, watching us like a snake. Our eyes met for a split second, and every hair on my body stood up.
One word, defection and lives.
We're on the line. When I read Shellman's message, my parents' wrinkled faces rose up in my mind, and the guilt closed around my throat. But those peaceful lights I'd just seen through the window, they wouldn't leave me live as a monitored machine or risk everything to show my newborn daughter a real world where she could breathe on her own. A desperate love for her started swallowing the fear. Nobody said a word out loud. But in that dark, blood-stained corner, our secret plan started turning like a giant gear that couldn't be stopped. We said it to each other, too. If this many people move at the same moment, we won't all cross the border alive. And still, everyone nodded. If even one more of us reaches free ground, that's enough. The problem was a small map, the address where we'd meet the local broker.
The day before our flight home.
A contact on the ground bumped into me in the arena hallway on purpose and slipped a sweat-soaked paper into my pocket. A death sentence for 3 generations. If it was found, I hid in a bathroom stall and unfolded it with shaking hands. Strange street names.
Times.
And 2 or 3 different meeting points where those of us who'd made up our minds would scatter and head separately. I crushed that map into the thick padding inside, my reeking hockey glove. Every time I pulled the glove on, that stiff paper touched my fingertips like a heartbeat, whispering, "Stay alive." 10 hours before our flight, at midnight, I lay wide awake. Then heavy leather boots came down the hall and stopped outside our door. Everyone up, into the hallway. Open your bags. My heart slammed against my ribs. A surprise search. We stood in a line, in our pajamas, pale, while the handler dug through our things, like a wolf hunting. His hand shoved into my bag. My breath stopped. My mouth went bone dry. He tossed my skates aside and grabbed the glove, the one with the map. His fingers started to push inside. What the hell is this?" A shout from the end of the hall, in another player's bag lining one of the ones who'd traded looks with me. They'd found a scrap of paper, a foreign phone number, a Korean name, clumsily hidden. They dragged him out on the spot. He never came back to the locker room. The handler's head snapped toward the shouting. My glove just got thrown to the floor. Cold sweat evaporated off me, and a violent chill rolled in. Relief and guilt hit at the same time, and twisted my gut. We understood then. Half of us were already too late. We had to get out of this hell before morning. 5 a.m., a massive central station, tens of thousands of strangers, moving through every day. We stood in 2 columns guarding our bags, all in the same black tracksuits. The agents were wired tight from a night of no sleep. The meeting point was a cafe, just outside the north gate, maybe 150 feet away. But slipping past the watch felt like 1,000 miles. Then a station worker came up and started arguing with the security chief. Over a headcount problem, 2 agents turned to translate. The last one glanced toward the restrooms.
Now?
Cheolmin's lips moved without a sound. But we weren't the only ones waiting for that gap. Up and down the line, like it was rehearsed, 3 or 4 men turned in different directions at once and started to scatter. In an instant, the whole waiting hall turned to chaos. Someone bolted for the restrooms. Someone else broke for the far platform. Cheolmin and I ran straight for the north gate, where the crowd was thickest. Behind us, screams to grab those men, whistles, all of it tangled together. The whole team seemed to evaporate at once.
I heard later that the station erupted, like the entire North Korean squad
Had disappeared into thin air. But of all that chaos, only a handful actually reached the edge of freedom. I didn't know that yet. We slammed into people, leapt over rolling suitcases, and sprinted. We shoved through the glass exit doors, and the 5-degree air rushed into my lungs. Even that cold was the first taste of freedom I'd ever known. Out on the streets of that strange city, the north wind cut my cheeks like a blade, but fear had swallowed the cold whole. We ran toward one thing, a crumpled map, and 3 words, the embassy. Cheolmin, run. Stop and we die. The cold air sawed through my chest. Rounding an icy alley, I slipped and drove my knee into the concrete. My pants tore. Blood soaked through. Cheolmin grabbed me by the collar and hauled me up. Behind us, security agents combed the streets, like a wolf pack after prey. Get caught in our families back home. Would vanish like dust. Every corner, headlights swept over us, and we crushed ourselves behind a trash bin. Holding our breath, in that brief silence, I pictured my teammates' faces one by one. Did they all make it to their meeting points? For those few minutes, I prayed, please just let me live long enough to get out, at least until my daughter's grown. And please keep the others safe, tonight wherever they scattered. As dawn stained the sky deep blue, the huge iron gate of the South Korean embassy finally rose up in front of us, shut tight just where the map said. We threw ourselves at it like animals, pounding the frozen iron with bare, bloody hands, jamming the intercom.
Please, save us. Open the gate.
My voice was already gone. I looked back. Down the alley, Men in black coats came charging. Despair wrapped around my whole body. And then the heavy gate slowly swung open with a mechanical hum. On instinct, we threw ourselves through the gap and rolled inside. The gate slammed shut behind us, cutting off the shouting outside completely. We lay collapsed in the embassy courtyard. Warm light poured down. A stunned Korean staffer said one thing: "You made it safe." And the mountain of control and terror that had crushed us. Our whole lives melted in an instant. We sat on the cold concrete and wept like animals.
Freedom.
It was just this, the plain, enormous human right to close your eyes and sleep without fear. North Korea's steel warriors of the ice, that dawn, cried the hottest tears of their lives. Getting through the embassy gate wasn't the end. Under relentless threats from the north, we held out in a cramped embassy room for a full 6 months. Over those months, we slowly learned the truth about that night. 2 of the teammates who scattered with us never reached free ground. They were caught on the spot and sent back. 1 more headed for a different country's embassy, then went silent. To this day, no one knows if he's alive or dead. In the end, out of all that chaos, only 2 of us made it to freedom. Me and Shailman. Every night I choked back bloody tears, my parents' faces. My wife, my daughter, all mixed together with the faces of the men who never made it out. After nerve-wracking talks by the South Korean government, we were finally cleared to go. When the special flight touched down and I set foot on South Korean soil, the sight of a convenience store with its lights on 24 hours floored me. I passed through Hanoi, the resettlement center for North Korean defectors, and settled into a strange new society. A long time has passed since then. That tiny newborn who slept in my arms has grown up. She's a college student now. And these days, I coach hockey to little kids here in South Korea, living plain, ordinary days.
Cheol Min.
2 is building his own life in another city, steady as ever. Even now, the 2 of us sometimes say the names of the men who scattered with us that night, quietly under our breath. If reunification ever comes, the first place I want to go is the sea off Cheongjin. I want to pour a glass of soju at my parents' graves, and I want to call out one by one the names of the friends I skated with on that frozen reservoir with wooden skates, and the names of the men who, that night, never made it home with us. I just pray with everything I have that our generation gets to see that day. Defector Untold Stories. We'll be back next time with another breathtaking piece of history buried until now.